What's the emergency?
Hi, I'm at the corner of Pleasant Hill and John Young Parkway. I'm in a wall.
The concept of a last meal for death row inmates has always fascinated people for years. It's a peculiar tradition that allows prisoners to choose their final meal before facing execution. But what does this say about us as a society, and what do these choices reveal about the human psyche? Choosing a last meal is a complex decision that carries significant emotional weight. On one hand, it's a chance to indulge in comfort foods that bring nostalgia and happiness. On the other hand, it's a harsh reminder of the impending doom that awaits. Some prisoners have opted for lavish feasts, while others have chosen more humble options. Stay tuned as we uncover the chilling stories behind these final moments. If you're fascinated by the darker corners of history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more haunting tales. Helio ConEd. On October 10, 1993, while serving 2 consecutive life sentences for murders he committed in 1990, ConEd beat his cellmate, 55-year-old Banal, to death with a padlock attached to the end of his belt. Prison guards found Banal lying on the cell floor with his hands tied behind his back with a belt. ConEd had no apparent wounds or injuries, but his boots and clothing were covered with blood. Blood was splattered and smeared on the cell walls, the bedding of both bunks, and the furniture. Concealed in a pair of boots, the officers found a belt in the face of a combination lock. The body of the lock had been dumped in the cell's commode. Banal was serving a 15-year sentence for murder. He died 2 days after the attack. ConEd unsuccessfully asserted self-defense at trial. For his last meal he had 7 beef and cheese enchiladas, pico de gallo, 2 cheeseburgers, fries and 2 pieces of fried chicken. His last words: "I was in there now thinking about how we grew up. You know how we grew up in the same house. We need to start loving each other like we used to. I'm going to be okay. Y'all take care of yourself, may God have mercy on my soul." With his last statement concluded, the lethal injection was started. ConEd then laughed and lifted his head from the gurney. "I thought it was going to be harder than this," he said, grinning. "I am ready to go. I'm going to sleep now. I can feel it. It's affecting me." He then lost consciousness and began snoring. John Parker. Parker was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to die for the killing of Elizabeth Dorleen Sennett, 45, who was stabbed repeatedly and beaten with a pipe at her Colbert County home. Prosecutors said Parker was one of 2 men paid $1,000 each by a third man on behalf of her husband, the Reverend Charles Sennett, who was in debt and wanted to collect life insurance. He committed suicide a week after his wife's slaying. Parker declined to eat breakfast the day of his execution, but later in the day had a final meal of fried fish, French fries and iced tea. He gave most of his possessions to his mother, including a gold watch, a mirror, 7 stamps and a box of pictures. He gave a belt and a wallet to 2 nephews. When asked if had any final words, Parker turned his head to face Mike and Charles Sennett, the victim's sons, and said, "I'm sorry. I don't ever expect you to forgive me. I really am sorry." David Powell. David Powell's record 32 years on death row ended. Austin police officer Ralph Ablanedo, 26, pulled over a vehicle for not displaying a rear license plate. The driver, Sheila Minard, 27, got out of the car and approached him. Told him she had lost her driver's license, but she showed him her passport. The officer asked the dispatcher by radio to check Minard and her passenger, David Powell, 27, for outstanding warrants. The dispatcher informed Ablanedo that the computers were not functioning properly, but that there were no local warrants for Minard. Ablanedo issued Minard a citation for the license plate and allowed her to drive away. However, as she was pulling out, the dispatcher told Ablanedo that Powell had a possible warrant for misdemeanor theft. The dispatcher called for Officer Bruce Mills, Ablanedo's partner, to go out to back up Ablanedo. Ablanedo stopped the vehicle again. As he was approaching the car, and Minard was walking toward him, Powell shot at the officer through the back window with an AK-47 machine gun. Initially, the weapon was set to semi-automatic mode. Ablanedo tried to get up, but Powell switched the weapon to full automatic mode, fired at him again. The car then left. Officer Mills arrived a few minutes later. Ablanedo had been shot 10 times. Even though he was wearing a bulletproof vest, it was not designed to withstand fire from automatic weapons. Powell's background was different from most other capital murder defendants. He graduated from high school a year early and was both the valedictorian and most likely to succeed of his small rural school class. He was accepted into the honors program at the University of Texas. While there, he became an anti-war protester and began using drugs. He never finished college. By 1978, he was a heavy user and dealer of methamphetamine. Powell was one of only 12 prisoners remaining on Texas death row who committed their capital offenses in the 1970s. He was the longest-serving inmate executed in Texas since the state resumed carrying out executions in 1982. For his final meal he had 4 eggs, 4 chicken drumsticks, salsa, 4 jalapeno peppers, lettuce, tortillas, hash browns, garlic bread, 2 pork chops, white and yellow grated cheese, sliced onions and tomatoes, a pitcher of milk and a vanilla shake. He did not have any last words. Ronnie Lee Gardner. Gardner was an American criminal who received the death penalty for killing a man during an attempted escape from a courthouse in 1985, and was executed by a firing squad by the state of Utah in 2010. He is the most recent person to be executed by this method. His case spent nearly 25 years in the court system, prompting the Utah House of Representatives to introduce legislation to limit the number of appeals in capital cases. In October 1984, Gardner killed Melvin John Otterstrom, 37, during a robbery in Salt Lake City. While being moved in April 1985 to a court hearing for the homicide, he fatally shot attorney Michael Burdell, 36, in an unsuccessful escape attempt. Convicted of 2 counts of murder, Gardner was sentenced to life imprisonment for the first charge and received the death penalty for the second charge. The state adopted more stringent security measures due to the incident at the courthouse. While held at Utah State Prison, Gardner was charged with another capital crime for stabbing an inmate in 1994. However, that charge was discarded by the Utah Supreme Court because the victim survived. For his last meal Gardner requested steak, lobster tail, apple pie, and vanilla ice cream. He wanted to eat his meal while watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Prison personnel prepared the meal on site. Alcohol was not served or used in the cooking of the meal. When asked if he had any last words, Gardner responded, "I do not, no." Michael Perry. Michael Perry and his friend Jason Aaron Burkett decided to steal 2 cars from the parents of another friend, 17-year-old Adam Stotler. Burkett knocked on the front door and asked to use the phone. Perry then went into the house through the back door in the garage with a shotgun and hid in the laundry room. Perry then knocked on the back door. When Sandra Stotler went to the back door, Perry came out of the laundry room and shot her in her side. Sandra Stotler fell, then tried to get up, and Perry shot her again. They loaded the body into the back of a truck and rolled her body into a nearby lake. Burkett and Perry then drove to pick up another friend, Kristen Willis, from work and returned to the Stotler house. When Adam Stotler arrived with his friend Jeremy Richardson, Burkett and Perry convinced them that a friend had been shot in the woods and needed their help. Adam and Jeremy followed Willis's truck into a nearby wooded area and according to Perry, Burkett then shot Jeremy and then Adam. They returned to the Stoller home then went to a bar. 2 days later, Perry was stopped for a traffic violation and after a high-speed chase was arrested and booked in as Adam Stoller since he had his wallet. Several days later after posting bail, while in the stolen Isuzu, Perry and Burkett ran into a deputy sheriff's vehicle while trying to escape arrest. Both were arrested hiding in a neighboring apartment complex where the shotgun used to kill Sandra Stotler was found. Forensic evidence found near Crater Lake, in the woods, and at the Stotler residence matched Perry's confession. Perry was tried for Sandra Stotler's murder. For his last meal he had 3 bacon, egg, cheese omelets. In addition 3 chicken cheese enchiladas and 3 each of Pepsi, Coke and Dr. Pepper. His last words, "I want to start off by saying I want everyone to know that's involved in this atrocity that I forgive them." He sobbed briefly, then whispered, "Mom, I love you. I'm coming home, Dad. I'm coming home." Thomas Grao. On December 24, 1990, Grao strangled Hilda Johnson, an 87-year-old woman, using her Christmas tree lights in her Tulsa home. He stole $8 from her purse, $4 in loose change, and her television set which he sold for $125. Lana's grandma was the neighbor and best friend of Johnson. 6 months later, after moving to New York with Lana, his now wife, he murdered Leslie Holtz, an 81-year-old man from Staten Island, on July 4, 1991, stealing his Social Security check. On the day before his execution, Grao released 4 statements to the press. The first, at 3 p.m., read. What we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. The second, released at 8:25 p.m., read. For most of us, there is only the unattended moment, the moment in and out of time. And right action is freedom from the past and future also. The first part of the second statement is a line from T.S. Eliot's The Dry Salvages. Shortly before 10 p.m., 3 hours before his execution time, he issued the third statement in the form of a light-hearted poem commemorating his forthcoming dispatch. The poem was entitled A Visit with Mystery. Ready, willing, and waiting am I. Asked for death but could not die. Each sunrise is one day less. I'll endure this horrible mess. When the last sun does sink, Mr. E will serve a goodbye drink. On the day our paths do cross, it won't take much to see it through. Just a little toxic brew. The warden will read my last creed. And the deadly brew will flow. As the poison drips into my veins. And from my body life does drain. I'll know then once and for all what last call means when serving Toxahole. Grasso's last meal was 2 dozen steamed mussels, 2 dozen steamed clams flavored by a wedge of lemon, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, a half dozen barbecued spare ribs, 2 strawberry milkshakes, 1/2 of a pumpkin pie with whipped cream, diced strawberries. And he requested a can of SpaghettiOs with meatballs, though he used his last words to claim the kitchen staff did not honor this request. Less than an hour before he died, he issued his fourth and final statement. I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this. James D. French. It's not clear what James D. French ate in 1966 was an American double murderer who was the last person executed under Oklahoma's death penalty laws before Furman v. Georgia, which suspended capital punishment in the United States from 1972 until 1976. French was convicted of the 1961 murder of Eddie Lee Shelton, his cellmate, while he was serving a sentence of life imprisonment for a separate 1958 murder of a motorist named Frank Boone. French ultimately faced trial 3 times for Shelton's murder, with his sentence being overturned twice. French requested a death sentence and waived his appeals, fighting multiple efforts from attorneys hired by third parties to spare his life despite the application of the death penalty otherwise being at a near standstill in Oklahoma and the United States as a whole. Aside from being the final person executed in Oklahoma before the Furman v. Georgia ruling, French was the third to last person executed in the United States before the ruling, surpassed only by Aaron Mitchell in California and Luis Monge in Colorado, who were respectively executed in April 1967 and June 1967. French was the only person executed in the United States in 1966. It has been alleged that French's last words were, "How's this for your headline? French fries." The story appeared in 1977 in the Book of Lists. However, contemporaneous accounts of the execution confirm that when prison warden Ray Page asked if French had any last words, French replied, "Everything's already been said." Ricky Lee Sanderson. Ricky Lee Sanderson was sentenced for sexually assaulting and murdering 16-year-old Susie Holloman and burying her in a shallow grave. In prison he embraced evangelical Christianity. A Washington Business Journal writer described the gas chamber scene, where the girl's father was watching. Sanderson nodded his head calmly and stared at us. He told Jesus he was coming to meet him in heaven. Sanderson confessed to the murder of 16-year-old Susie Holloman of Davidson County in 1987, 2 years after the killing, while he was serving a life plus 110-year sentence for 2 sexual assaults. His confession freed a man who had been charged and who was a month away from trial. Throughout the legal process, including 3 sentencing hearings after mandatory state appeals, Sanderson wanted to be executed. He declined his last meal as a protest against pregnancy termination before being put to death in the gas chamber. Thank you for watching and joining me on this journey through the final moments of history's most infamous figures. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more intriguing tales. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay curious.